Let's start with the magic of compounding. Let's start with the basic. What is compound interest? That is interest earned upon interest. So let's say we have $100, go to the bank. If you can earn 10%, now you have $110.
Welcome back, everybody, to the Plan to Rise Above podcast, powered by P.M.G. Wealth Management.
In this episode, we're going to talk about how to build life-changing wealth.
And just each time, it just kind of keeps going up and up and up. It's not just that I get $10, $10, $10, $10. Eventually, you get $10, $11, $12, and it just kind of keeps building upon itself.
At the end of the day, no matter what, you do not want credit card debt. It's like one of the worst things you could have. Something might have cost you $100 is really costing you $200 if you're using credit card to debt. You don't want compound working against you, you want it working with you.
Let's remember the main point, which is if you know your debt is compounding, then maybe we should be throwing everything at it. Unfortunately, we're all being marketed at 1,000 times a day or more, right?
The best thing you can do with compounding is never interrupt it, and then also keep doing it month by month, week by week. Make sure to save and to compound. By the time you're in your 40s, 50s, everything can start to be on autopilot because you put in the work early on.
The earlier and the more consistently you invest, the more powerful it will be. And I bet your future self will thank you for that. Today, we're talking about the eighth wonder of the world. Welcome back to the Plan to Rise podcast, powered by PMG Wealth Management. This is our 5th episode, and today we are going to be talking about the eighth wonder of the world. I was just in my college town a week or two ago, and it was really cool. All my old buddies that I haven't talked to in a while, they were coming up to me saying they've seen the podcast, they listened in, and they're listening and they're learning, which is, I think, pretty cool.
Yeah, and I see our LinkedIn page. The engagement is through the roof. We've never had so much traction on those sites. Same thing. I get texts all the time. It's like, well, this video is sick. I was like, well, thank you for watching. And, hopefully this episode is another one that you guys can learn from and we can keep the momentum.
Yeah, it's pretty fun because even when I bumped into you on Saturday night and saw some of your friends too, they came up to me and they're like, hey, man, I've been watching the podcast. And part of me, I will say, because I'm a little bit of a skeptic, part of me will kind of look at it a little bit like, oh, are you really? And then they just keep going and going. I'm like, hey, they really are.
Yeah.
So it's fantastic. We enjoy that. And obviously, we're happy that you guys all enjoy that. And we're going to try to add more to it today. And you said episode 5, right?
Yeah, episode 5. And then in this episode, we're going to talk about how to build life-changing wealth. And then also talk about why the first 100,000 is the hardest and the most important, and then how compounding can make someone who's just an ordinary person become really wealthy. So, Phil, what are some of the things you think the listener might take away from today?
Well, again, let's start with the magic of compounding, right? Let's start with the basic. This is kind of the beginning of compounding. We did talk a little bit about this in episode 3. So, again, if you enjoy this, go back to and watch that one as well. But let's start with, again, $100. So we're going to start simple. Compound interest. What is compound interest, right? So that is interest earned upon interest. So let's say we made $100, or we have $100. Go to the bank or wherever, and if you can earn 10%, now you have $110, right? You made $10 on that $100, so now we have $110. If we had take that same $110 over the next year time frame or whatever time frame, and now all of a sudden that money goes up. How much does that go up? Well, it goes up $11. It doesn't go up the same $10. So all of a sudden, we got this little kicker for some weird reason that didn't exist the first go around, but then exists the second time, right? And then it's saying so that goes to 121. 121 goes up again $12 the next time. And just each time, it just kind of keeps gradually going up and up and up. And you start to get this hockey stick kind of approach to what the math is doing behind the scenes. And it's not just it's not this that I get $10, $10, $10, $10. Eventually you get $10, $11, $12, $13, and so on and so forth. And it just kind of keeps building upon itself, right?
Yeah, because then after 30 years, that $100 will go up 17x. So 100 is going to turn into 1,700. That's 4 doubles. And that's a smaller example, but when you think of maybe you start with 100,000, after 30 years, that might be 2 million after compound interest. So there's all different ways to look at it. Another extreme example I like to give people is, would you rather have $1 million today, or would you rather have a penny that doubles every day for 30 days? A lot of people might say, hey, I don't want a penny. I want $1 million. That's what I would take. But the penny doubling every day is an extreme example of compound interest, and that would turn into $5.3 million after 30 days. So that's like one of those things that really caught my eye when I was first learning about compound interest. Like, wait, like I want to have tons of money. I don't want to just have a smaller amount. So I like using that example with people.
Yeah, and compounding doesn't really care where you start or when you start or how much you start. It cares that how long you stay consistent with adding to the account or building those retirement accounts. You got to stay with it. You can't just expect it to, well, you can, but compounding will do its course. But you adding it, dollar cost averaging the account will help a lot.
Yeah, and it does get addicting because even I know for myself, when I started investing when I was 18, at first it might have been $1,000 and that 1,000 grew to 100. I was like, whoa, look, Dad, I made $100 on my,
Yeah.
my investment today. And then before you know it, 10 years later, it might be $500,000, $1 million. And all of a sudden that 10% of $1 million is 100,000. And you're really making those huge swings, hopefully in the right direction over the long term. And so that's a concept, like the earlier you can grasp it and understand it, the better off you're going to be.
Now, Ryan, hold on. You mentioned a phrase in there, the dollar cost averaging. Can you dig into that just for a second?
So dollar cost averaging is, it doesn't matter the amount you have or the time frame. It's just consistently getting into the market or investing that money. So let's say you have $200 that you want to contribute. Doesn't matter the market, doesn't matter the price of the stock that you want to buy. You just get it to work. And over time, it'll fluctuate, and those stock prices and the amount of shares will also fluctuate, but it'll be more even than, say, somebody just putting in $1,000 at the start of the year and letting that ride out.
Yeah, it makes it a lot more mindless because if you, like I said, if you come in the door with 100,000, you're like, do I want to put it all in today? You're going to worry about the next big news or whatever might happen, and it might make you nervous. So to Ryan's point, like if you break that up and you say, hey, I'm going to do 1,000, 1,000, 1,000 each month, you're buying some at the high point, some at the low point, and that's why it averages out over time. And another thing too, it's just having the discipline. That's the biggest thing. Just making those savings automatic every month and having that discipline is one of the biggest things I see for people that are successful, building, life-changing money.
Mm-hmm. Perfect. And now, so let's go on to the next segment. We're going to talk about something that they do touch on in school, but maybe they don't touch on enough, which is the rule of 72. George, you want to take that?
Yeah, so the rule of 72 is you take 72 and divide it by your return rate. So let's say you assume a 10% return. You take 72 divided by 10%, and that will give you the amount of years it takes to double. So 72 divided by 10 is 7.2 years. So that means every 7.2 years, your money is doubled. Everyone's going to make different return assumptions, but whatever, you're invested in and the returns you've seen in the past and the returns you expect going forward, you can use it to apply with your assets and see where you might be, 20, 30 years from now.
Yeah. And then the other piece of it, let's just say 72 divided by 7, right? So let's say if you only made 7%, then it would take roughly 10 years. And then if you're dividing by 8, then it would take 9. And if you're divided by 9, it would take 8, right? So you can kind of do that math with anything in terms of, how long it takes to double the money, which is important, especially when we go back to comparing ourselves first to why do you want to be in the market over maybe the bank or somewhere else? Because if the bank is paying you 3%, well, then, 72 divided by 3 takes a hell of a long time, right? Whereas 72 divided by 8, 9, or 10, or 11, or 12, or whatever, it takes a smaller window of time, right? So that's where all of a sudden then you, again, with the compounding, the doubling factor, well, how many doubles can you get within a lifetime or in your window of investing and saving, right?
Yeah, and I even look at my own personal bank account, and it pays 0.01% interest. So I don't know what the math is on that, but to double on that, it probably takes hundreds of years. So that's why, I gravitate towards the stock market. Historically, you've averaged around a 10% return, but there's up and downs markets. But over the long term, if you have a 10% return, that doubles, every 7 years roughly. So let's say you have 250,000, that doubles to 500,000, 500,000 to $1 million, and then $1 million to $2 million. And for a lot of people, 2 million is a large nest egg that they can live off during retirement. And then hopefully from there, 2 to 4, and it just keeps growing after that.
Yeah, and I just wanted to add, it kind of works in the opposite way. Compounding interest is like evil cousin debt. Like debt compounds the same way Like say you have a 20% credit card interest rate, it'll double just like how compound interest will work for you, except for it's working against you. So you got to make sure you're building the right compounding, not the debt side, but the growth side for your investments.
And then to Ryan's point, let's say you take the rule of 72 and divide it by 20%, which is a credit card interest rate. You might be paying 20% on that debt. That means your debt's going to double every 3 to 4 years. So what something might have cost you $100 is really costing you $200 if you're using credit card to debt. So that's, you don't want compound working against you, you want it working with you. And
yeah.
Yeah, and that's a big one to bring up today too, right? Because there's a lot of people out there carrying a lot of debt, and they're trying to navigate their paychecks and navigate everything going on in the world. And when you're burdened with all that, all those choices and all those debt, obviously that adds up. And you do still see a lot of people that'll come in and they're making minimum payments, but then there's still it's not like people just are totally still living paycheck to paycheck that are still carrying debt. I mean, some yes, a lot of times they are, but a lot of times they're still also making some interesting choices while they're carrying debt, right? Sometimes people still buy some things that they probably shouldn't be buying while they're carrying debt. So, I mean, I don't mean to be mean here, but what I'm looking at too is like the point being is like, let's remember the main point, which is if you know your debt is compounding, then maybe we should be throwing everything at it, right? And and you got to take it more serious. So that's one of those things. Like, yeah, if your debt's doubling every 3 to 4 years, which is horrible, then we should be taking every extra penny that you have, throwing it at that money.
And we've seen it too, where clients with a lot of assets, like I'm talking 2 million plus, that have credit card debt at times. So if that's use as an opportunity to maybe consolidate it. Maybe you take out a HELOC at a lower interest rate than a credit card, or you use some of those non-retirement assets to pay it down. Because, I mean, at the end of the day, no matter what, you do not want credit card debt. It's like one of the worst things you could have.
It's one of those things that they may brush over in school, but they don't really talk about a ton, right? And it's unfortunately, we're all being marketed at 1,000 times a day or more, right? It is an easy trap to fall into, but just remember, again, that compounding piece of math, we're trying to get to work for you, but it does also work against you if you end up in a bad situation with a lot of debt.
And I guess let's transition in. How are some of the ways it can work for you? I don't know, Ryan, if you want to touch on this. Like if you wanted to reach $1 million by 65, what are some of the things that someone could do who's listening?
Starting earlier obviously works for you. It helps way more than starting a little bit later or saying, let's push it back 5 years. And the earlier you start, the better. So let's just say to reach $1 million by age 65, we'll assume an 8% return. To start at 20, doing around $215 a month. Like that's not that much to it kind of is to a 20-year-old, but it's just getting in the habit of doing it. To start at 30, it's $480 a month. So it's already doubled the amount you need to put in it to say that you started at 20. At 40, it's $1,140. So that's
5 times.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it just, the earlier you start, it is better.
Yeah, exactly. The earlier you start, the better. I mean, that's something I always tell people coming out of college. It's never too soon to start. It makes your life a lot easier down the line. I mean, even myself, if I didn't save what I did in my 20s, I would be a lot more stressed financially than I am now. But Phil knows that from the minute I got here, I was just putting money away. And now that, my expenses are way higher, I have a nest egg that I can fall back on. So like that's something, like if there's one thing to take away from this, it's to start early.
This segment specifically, right, I wanted to have the math behind it. At age 20, that number is $215 a month, right? Which I still think is actually somewhat possible if you are working part-time. Like it is possible, right? And then again, obviously if you're 30, you're just starting now at the age 30, $480 a month. Obviously it takes a little bit longer because your window gets compressed. Essentially the amount more than doubles. It's $480 versus the $215. But yeah, these are still things that are still attainable, right? And that's where I think you just got to go out there and try to make it a priority. And there's another weird one, right, where we talk a little bit, sometimes you'll mention like Charlie Munger, I think comes up here later, and we talk a little bit about Warren Buffett, right? But there's the joke about Warren Buffett didn't want to ever get a haircut, right, when he was a young kid, supposedly. And did you ever read this? Like he wanted to get his haircut. He didn't want to spend $10 because in his mind when he was
I
young,
have seen this.
Sounds like Dave Ramsey right now.
a little bit, yeah. But like when he was like, when he was like a young guy, he's like $10, in my lifetime is going to end up being like $1 million. And obviously, when you live to like be in your upper 90s or whatever, like $10 can be $1 million. So it's kind of a crazy thing that just making those choices to put that money aside to get into the market is really where young Warren was at, years and years and years ago. But again, we're giving you the math. At age 20, $215 goes a long way to get you on the path to be a millionaire.
You might not realize it today, but $1,000 decision today is equal to like a $30,000 decision for your retirement, just because the value of compound interest.
Yeah, and I've done, like I said, I've done stupid stuff along the way. Yeah, we obviously manage money for a living and do all this kind of stuff, but there's times where I'm buying things when I was younger, probably living above my means, so to speak. At times, but I also had a very strong belief in what we were doing and how we were growing and all that goes with that. But yeah, if I had a chance, like a do-over, man, I would have been a way more aggressive saver. If I had to change like one thing, that would have been the one. Even for me, like that would have been something I would have changed in a heartbeat. So
isn't there that stat with Warren Buffett that he made like 90% of his total wealth past 50?
Yes. Yeah, I think it was higher. It was like 98 or 99% after age 50.
It just proves compounding works.
All
forever.
compound
It doesn't
interest.
matter who you are. It's just
So then let's go into in this segment. I kind of like the fourth one, which is the first 100,000 is the hardest. We had somebody in here recently, and this kind of math somewhat came up. Ironically, let's just say you had 6,000. I'm using this number for a reason. 6,250, right? And you start with that $6,250. And let's go back to our rule of 72, which we already touched on a minute ago. So if money doubles every 7 to 10 years, let's just stay in that window. 6,250 becomes, when that doubles, 12,500, first double, 25,000, second double, 50,000, third double, 100,000. So that could take basically, anywhere from 28 to 40 years if you're never adding a penny. It's for $6,250 to become 100,000. So that's a long time if you're not adding to it. Now, on the flip side of that, let's just say you start with 100, which we know you don't start there, but look at this crazy math. 100,000 goes to 200,000, 400,000, 800,000, 1.6 million, right? So you actually get, from again, that hockey stick piece, you get 1.5 million, growth from 100,000, whereas in the same time frame, when you only start with 6,250 goes to 100,000, you get $93,500. So that's the magic of compounding. You get 1.5 million versus 93.5, and it's 6. So, which comes back to begs the question of, well, what should we all be doing when we have less than 100,000? We should be killing ourselves to get 100,000. Right?
Yeah, I always like what Mark Cuban from Shark Tank says. He's like, live like a broke college kid. He's like, do what you can to get to that first 100,000. Too often I see kids that are young adults that are first graduated. They're so worried about the investment. And, one thing I want to remind them, a 10% return on $10,000 is less than a 2% return on $100,000. So you got to remember, you got to build that nest egg to where compound interest is more meaningful. So you got, like I said, you got to do whatever you can to get there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's great. That's great. And then what do we have for the next segment?
Compounding behind the money. That's you got to work it in your real life. You got to compound everything. You got to be working towards something, the finish line, better golf score. You got to practice. Practicing makes perfect. Same with compounding. Compounding will make you wealthy.
It's so even if you're working out, if you work out one day, nothing's going to really change. You got to do it every day, little by little. After a year, 5 years, 10 years, that's when you're going to really start to see change. And just like compounding. And that applies working out, relationships, learning. And we're here every day. Like Phil would, when I first started, you'd say, did you learn anything new today? Because you want to get 1% better each day. And that's when you really start to see significant changes.
And we did talk about mindset. Was that episode 4? Maybe
yeah,
it was
one
episode
of them.
4.
You'll notice a lot of our slogans we like to repeat. 1% better each day. There's a bunch of them, and we like to live in our own lives. Trying to compound our business, compound our life, our relationships, our health too. So it's something something that we really focus on.
Yeah. But again, like I would say like this, we don't want to sound like a broken record by any means, but I think this is stuff that was not pounded on at school as much as it should be. This stuff is not that complicated, but I think people do know the story, but they don't know it enough or they forget it. So it's a nice reminder. And it's one of those things that I just think you got to pound the table on. That you want to make everything, all these daily habits, essentially,
Yeah.
So
Yeah, good things take time. You're never going to get rich overnight. So I guess to wrap it all together, just practical takeaways that you could, start tomorrow if you want to. The first thing would be start early. Even if it's $50 a month, go ahead and just get it started, get momentum. The next one is to stay consistent. The best thing you can do with compounding is never interrupt it, and then also keep doing it month by month, week by week. Make sure every 2 weeks, a portion of your paycheck is going away to save and to compound. And then also don't underestimate the first 100,000. That's one of those things you got to do everything in your power to get to, because that's when compounding really starts to make the change. Long term, compounding can do the heavy lifting. By the time you're in your 50s, 40s, 50s, everything can start to be on autopilot because you put in the work early on, and you get to see some of the results from that hard work.
Yeah.
Is there anything you wanted to add?
Yeah,
there?
I mean, like I said, we've got a number of clients here who start with their kids or get their kids going, right? And they may come in when they're 13, 14, 15 years old, and they're putting away their money from reffing, hockey, or they're putting away their money from umping baseball games, or they're putting away money from working at a hot dog stand or whatever it is. You want to start, young, obviously, and if you're older and you got kids, well, you got to get your kids involved and start with them. Important first step, I guess, is that. And then as you go through school and you get it, you get out of school, the same thing. Like we have like a kind of a basic first rule, even when we're telling people with their 401ks, right? Like we want people doing 10% to their 401k every year, because again, we want you kind of putting a little bit of pressure on yourself. That 10% figure when you finally get to be an older age, that bucket that gets built, it kind of lines up with your spending habits from that time frame anyways. But again, like 10% for somebody who's 22 is not always easy, but we want to enforce that, to get you going down the right path.
Yeah, and don't beat yourself up either, because I know even when I was a young kid, I was doing dumb stuff with my money. I remember I think it was my first $10,000 maybe saved just from doing stuff in the neighborhood, doing different chores. And I was like, Dad, I had this really beat up pickup truck. I was like, Dad, I really want a new car. I'll give you $10,000 and then maybe you can match it and we could get something nice. Mm-hmm. And that was a dumb investment. I should have kept the truck and just rode it to the ground. I did enjoy that car a lot, but I learned from my mistakes. And as I got older, I started adapting this mindset of compounding and really putting my money to work versus buying liabilities.
Yeah. I'm going to add one. We don't have it written down here, so this is definitely totally off script, right? Other compounding things you can do, right, is take advantage of the tax code, take advantage of what's out there, and obviously talk to a financial professional if it's not us, whoever, right? One, your 401k is built on a chassis of you get tax-deferred growth, right? So the IRS and Congress back in the day set up these rules for you to, incentivize you to put money away for retirement, right? Because they don't want you on the government dime, so to speak. So they create the 401k. So take advantage of the 401k. That's compounding in your work plan, right? Mm-hmm. If they have a Roth option, that money grows tax-free. Well, you don't get a tax break for it, but you'll never pay taxes on that money again. That Roth option in the 401k is a little bit newer, but the original Roth IRA goes back to the late 90s. Essentially, they put out a paper at the time, Congress at the time was like, hey, we know Social Security is not going to be enough. So they create the Roth IRA to incentivize you to do and save money. So at the same time, these things are out there for you to take advantage of. So you should be doing them. And again, there's subtle hints from the government at the same time to say, don't look at us. It's on you, buddy. So you better get on it anyway. And then I would also say, which does come under scrutiny from time to time, is, again, we like to call it the bridge. That after-tax investment account is the hardest one to get, right? Because this is money that you save from your paycheck and you put somewhere else into an investment account or the bank or whatever. That account, if it's invested in the market, well, that's where they have capital gains rates. You get taxed at capital gains rates, which are lower than ordinary income. And again, it's another incentive for you to put the money and save the money. So again, the government is trying to help you in certain areas of your life as well. So take advantage of that, because that's why it's there. Don't demonize it. Don't be a hater, so to speak. Like, hey, somebody built up all this money in this account. Like, it's there for a reason, because remember, at the end of the day, the government doesn't want you on their dime. You need to start saving as you can. So that's where I'm at.
No, I agree with that 100%. I mean, to have a successful retirement, you can't just bank on Social Security. You got to have enough income to supplement your lifestyle. So you're going to have to do that by having assets. And to build those assets, you got to start as soon as possible.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. The earlier and the more consistently you invest, the more powerful it will be. And I bet your future self will thank you for that. Like, just starting early. And
100%.
Yeah.
Yeah, 100%. So again, thank you everybody for tuning in again. We love all the feedback we're getting. Love bumping into people at places that are saying, hey, I'm watching everything, and we're seeing it. I will say the weirdest thing is had it happen to me. I think I don't know if it happened to you yet. I'm flipping on YouTube on my own channel, and I see things that I normally will watch. So there's like a chess thing and whatever that I'm looking at. And sure enough, there is, I see myself in the corner, and I'm like, how does that happen? Like, there he goes. Yeah, we're getting to be semi-famous on YouTube, I guess, or I don't know how that works, but either way, it's cool to see.
Yeah,
so
very
thank you,
cool.
everybody, for all the support. If you need anything, let us know. Anything else you want to add in closing?
No, that's it. We look forward to the next episode, and we'll talk to you guys soon.
Talk to you soon. Again, don't forget to plan to rise above. That's what you got to do. Make it happen.
And don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to our YouTube channel and LinkedIn.